The Indianapolis Colts have a deep tight end room with multiple skill sets. But is 2024 the year Jelani Woods becomes the tight end one? And what about Kylan Granson and Drew Ogletree? And where does the Colts tight end room rank in the AFC South? Let's talk about it. Welcome to the Horseshoe Huddle Podcast presented by Fan Nation on SI.com, part of the Fans First Sports Network. My name is Andrew Moore, and as always, I'm joined here by my fellow analyst and co-host here at Horseshoe Huddle, Drake Wally. Drake, the Colts tight end room, we've been saying it for a couple of years now. A lot of talent, a lot of young talent within this group, but we haven't really seen anyone take over or really anyone kind of exceed expectations or rise to their potential. We're hoping 2024 is the year, starting with big number 80, Jelani Woods, but there are a lot of other guys that are going to have something to say about that and want snaps at the tight end position.
Yeah, and it's one of the deeper tight end rooms I think that I've seen across the entire league. Honestly, like you're looking at a good problem at a very weird position. Typically, you get depth, too much depth at like wide receiver, cornerback, maybe at one of the offensive line positions or defensive end. Tight end is so unique to have a depth issue at, but a lot of these guys present different challenges to defenses. So really, it's a matter of what does Indianapolis want to do offensively? Are they more toward the committee approach, or do they want that undisputed tight end one? And if they do want the latter, man, you're hoping that it is Jelani Woods.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that because I think when we get into this discussion, I think Shane Steichen, for considering his past and what he has shown at his the stop in Philadelphia, in Los Angeles, I think there's a pretty clear-cut answer to that, but we'll have to talk about that tonight. So we're going to dive into the Colts tight end room, talk about Jelani Woods. Can he be that tight end one? But Kylan Granson, Drew Ogletree nipping on his heels. And then, of course, there's Mo Alley-Cox and Will Mallory potentially being a wild card. And then, of course, we're going to rank the Colts tight end room against the rest of the AFC South. Should be a really fun episode tonight. As we look at the chat here tonight, Truitt with the nightly super sticker. You guys, Death, Taxes, and Truitt being the first one to put in a super sticker on the evening. It's just a guarantee at this point. But thank you so much for all of your support. And Truitt says, boy, if he, I think he means Jelani Woods, if Jelani Woods could become tight end one, can you imagine the pressure it would take off the wide receivers and open up holes for Jonathan Taylor? Certainly something to think about. But Truitt, thank you so much for all of your support as always. NFL Nerd, good to see you. All the high potential upside on the roster this year is both exciting and possibly fool's gold. So NFL Nerd being cautiously optimistic. I kind of like it. You don't want to put the cart before the horse, but good to see you in here as well. Stats Matt, the third host of the show. Time to talk maybe the most widely disputed position on the team. Definitely some varying opinions about the tight end room. We've got Sean Contright. Hey guys, good to see you as well. And then Trevor, first time in live. Y'all got the best vibes of all Colts channels, is have some of the most realistic, biased views of any Colts channel. Hopefully it means unbiased, but much love to the dads. Trevor, we appreciate you, buddy. Really do. That's generous and very, very nice words coming out of your mouth. That's what Drake and I strive to be. Bring you unbiased Colts takes and really dive into some of the more nuanced talks about the Colts. So really appreciate it. And as other people join in tonight, please make sure you're following us on all of our socials, like Horseshoe Huddle on Facebook, follow at Colts on FN on X, and subscribe to the Horseshoe Huddle YouTube channel so you don't miss Drake and I here every Monday and Thursday night, plus all of the shorts that we're posting, so you get Colts content every single day of the week. But if you can't catch us live, we're on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever you listen to podcasts, we're on there as well. So make sure you subscribe, give us a 5-star review so we can reach other Colts fans just like you. So Drake, let's dive in. The fourth positional preview episode for us is the tight end position. And like I said, plenty of different skill sets on this team, and I think that kind of lines up with what the Colts want, in especially like the wide receiver room. You have all these different wide receivers that really bring a specific skill set. I think the same can be said about the tight end room. All of these guys are a little bit different, but they all provide a key aspect to what the Colts really want to do, not only in the passing game, but in the run game as well.
Yeah, and it's it allows you. I know that everyone wants to have the Kelsey and the Andrews and the Kittle. Everyone wants that kind of tight end. But the thing is, when you have a solid committee approach to this position, you can really throw a different guy out there for any given situation. Now, you don't have that top end guy yet that you were hoping Woods was going to be last year. But man, when we dive into each one of these guys, we're going to kind of just very briefly go through what they do well, what they excel at, what might be able to set them apart from the rest of the group. But yeah, man, I think that when you look at these names, Andrew, there's a different situation in game that they fit perfectly. And I think you kind of saw that last year minus Woods, of course.
Yeah, and let's talk about Woods. And typically, Drake, we start out with the number one player at the position.
Yeah.
This might be a little bit different because as of right now, I don't think we can consider Jelani Woods the tight end one for the Colts. I think he could potentially be that by even mid-season, but as of right now, I don't think you can firmly say Jelani Woods is the number one starting tight end for the Colts. Because of what's transpired early on in his career, his rookie season, in that 2022 season that we all want to forget about, he showed some flashes, and when he actually had some competent quarterback play, Jelani Woods was a menace out there, especially in the red zone. We have such high hopes for what he can do in 2023 in a new offense with Anthony Richardson, and then he doesn't even see the field. So we're kind of back to square one, and it's year 3 for Jelani Woods. It's a make or break season, really, for Jelani Woods. If he wants to establish himself as that top tight end and as the Colts tight end, not only of present, but of the future, I think it all has to start this season. And when you obviously coming out of college, you look at this huge athletic tight end, 6'7", 260 pounds, but runs a 4.6 40, and at the time was the most athletic tight end prospect we had ever seen. I think there's been a couple of other tight ends that have come out in the past 2 years that have knocked Jelani Woods down to either 2 or 3 in that ranking, but still, absolutely incredible. He's a rare specimen of an athlete at the tight end position. The biggest question is, and I'm going to give it to you, Drake, can Jelani Woods put it all together in 2024? And can we finally see Woods hit and realize his potential?
It's all about his health. And the reason that I say that he has already shown enough that you can say this guy would do great in the right system. Now you've got it with Steichen and with the right quarterback. Now you've got it with Richardson, and you have Jonathan Taylor and other weapons around him. Okay, so I'm looking at this guy's relative athletic score, and it is just gorgeous. Like, there's no other way to describe this guy athletically. A 4.6 40-yard dash, a 2.6 second 20-yard split, and a 1.5 second 10-yard split at like 260 pounds and 6'7". That's electric. Now, I can't take the credit for this because I actually heard this from Bring the Juice's Derek Larger. He made a great point about Jelani Woods in that 2022 season. 16 first downs, okay, and 3 touchdowns. 19 out of his 25 catches were impactful, okay? So this dude basically was a first down or touchdown machine. Like, so he can get the job done. It's just hard to gauge when you have the absolute dumpster fire that was the quarterback situation. I mean, 2 of those 3 guys have retired, and one of them's a third stringer that could get realistically upended by, a guy like Keaton Slovis. Obviously, we think Ellinger's staying, but I just think that Woods needs to stay healthy, Andrew. I think that if he can just learn to block a little bit better, we didn't see a whole lot of that in 2022, but if he can learn to block, get that route tree a little bit more nuanced, man, and you can build off the potential we saw with that crappy offense he had, man, the sky's the limit in the current offense. It's just all about Woods staying healthy.
Yeah, I think that's a huge part of it. Obviously, when you miss all of 2023, the first year in a new system, with new coaches that really haven't seen you that much, I mean, that's huge. And really, Shane Steichen even said it this spring. We really haven't had a good look at Jelani Woods until these OTAs in this offseason program. So the coaches are still learning Jelani Woods and what he can potentially bring to this offense and to this system. So yeah, I do think health is a big part of it. And obviously availability is, or the best ability is availability, like I always say.
It's
But
true.
I think it goes a little bit farther than that, Drake. And I want to, when you look at his play on the field, Jelani Woods, we know what he can bring in the red zone, I think already, because he's 6'7", because he's 255 pounds, and the way he can leap, the way he can just pick the ball right out of the air. But I think the biggest concern with Jelani Woods is the blocking ability. According to Pro Football Focus, his run blocking grade was only a 50.3. And I think as the season went along, he got better at that. Just looking at his final 3 games of the 2022 season, against the Chargers, it was a 58.0. Against the Giants, it was a 60.2, and then against the Texans, it was a 71.8. So he was getting better, and I think the last 4 weeks, it was gradually improving as a blocker. But if he wants to be the tight end one and out there for 80% of the snaps, being able to play both in line and in the slot as that move tight end, he's gonna have to be able to block, and block at a high level. That's where I think the biggest question mark lies with Jelani Woods. I don't necessarily think it's the receiving aspect. I think it's more as a blocker, because if you can have Jelani Woods as a blocker, that again will open up so many more things for this offense. And what I was kind of alluding to is, typically in the past, Shane Steichen has had one tight end. He really likes to use just one tight end all over the field, one all around tight end. The perfect example of that was Dallas Goedert in Philadelphia. So if Jelani Woods can be a guy that can play both in line and in the slot as a move tight end, I mean, that's the perfect recipe for Shane Steichen and in his offense. Because not only that, Drake, that means you could put Jelani Woods as an inline guy, and then if you want to have another tight end out there, you could have a Kylan Granson in the slot. You could have a Will Mallory in the slot, Drew Ogletree even. But I would think if Drew Ogletree's in the game, he's probably going to be inline, and Jelani Woods would be spread out wide somewhere. But it doesn't make it so obvious what the Colts are going to do. And if Jelani Woods isn't up to par with his blocking, that's really going to limit what he can, the sets that he's out there, if he can only be a move tight end. And I think when you look at this Colts team, there's more competition at that move tight end position too. So if Jelani Woods can only be a move tight end, then you've got Kylan Granson to deal with. You've got Will Mallory to deal with instead of, as an inline guy. And if you're able to play both, that just allows you to play so many more snaps with this offense, and allows you to be on the field and be in a lot more situations for this offense as well. Ultimately, I think that is the key for Jelani Woods to be the tight end one. Obviously, he has to stay healthy, because if you're not healthy and out there to prove it, you're not going to be that top tight end. But he really needs to mold his game into an overall tight end, not just somebody who can go out there and be in the red zone packages and catch touchdowns. If he wants to be that quote unquote tight end one, he's got to be a blocker, and he's got to be able to go out there and play 80 to 85% of the snaps.
Yeah, and you're, for no other reasons, it's because, one, this is still going to be a run-based offense. I mean, you're going to predicate everything around Richardson and Taylor. They're the two most dynamic guys outside of Pittman, okay? But no one on the team has home run ability like those two. So, I mean, that's first and foremost your two weapons. You're going to need to block. Okay. Then if, let's say, he can't block, he goes out to move tight end, it really starts to make that 6'7", 260-pound frame less than what you think it would be. Everyone, would be like, okay, against a linebacker, he's going to cook him. Against a defensive back, he's going to destroy him. Jelani Woods is not that great of a route runner. Okay, so you could probably see him maybe have some issues. I think that if you're talking about move tight end strictly, Granson and Mallory both are better than Woods. Woods has got to learn how to block, because I think that then you can start to build that route tree, build those receiving skills, make him into a complete weapon. But like you said, even before Dallas Goedert, Shane Steichen had Hunter Henry in Los Angeles. So, I mean, the guy is definitely more tuned to having that one tight end that kind of takes over a game, and then you have the backups for their respective roles.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that Jelani Woods has to go out there and play 80% of the snaps by any means, because if you've got Kylan Granson, Drew Ogletree, guys with that kind of talent, you want to use them and keep your tight ends fresh, not just run Jelani Woods into the ground. So I think that, and as Stats Mac, this is kind of what I was saying, want to say about Ogletree. Woods has a higher ceiling, but Ogletree, but Ogletree's floor is already higher, so he's got to at least be a serviceable blocker. And that's kind of what I'm saying here is Jelani Woods has to make sure his blocking is up to par, because if not, it's going to limit what packages he's able to be in, and it's going to limit his opportunities to go out there and be the top tight end for this Colts team. But let's talk about some of those other guys that could be vying for tight end one snaps, or the most snaps out from the tight end position, from that tight end group. And I think that's Kylan Granson and Drew Ogletree. Drake, those were the two guys that, when all were healthy, when there wasn't any suspensions or anything, it was Drew Ogletree and Kylan Granson who were gobbling up the lion's share of the tight end snaps. Drew Ogletree playing in line, and Kylan Granson in the slot as that move tight end. So with Jelani Woods coming back into the fold, what do you think it does to the roles for Kylan Granson and Drew Ogletree, and their expectations, if any? What does it change? And I guess, if do you think that these guys are going to start out the season in their respective roles already?
Yeah, I think unless Jelani Woods goes out there and just absolutely destroys the offseason, he's not going to start just outright and take over every, the bulk share of the snaps. I mean, like you said, Kylan Granson led all tight ends for the Colts in catches last season. I know he only had like 30, but, there were games where he was the safety blanket. I mean, him and Will Mallory helped carry the garbage offense for the Colts against the Falcons on Christmas Eve. So, I mean, Granson right away has the ability to separate better than any other tight end. Okay. He's got great route running. He's also got good hands. And I think that he's a trusted target for Anthony Richardson. I think he's already, becoming that undervalued name for Colts fans. Like Kylan Granson might be Anthony Richardson's most trusted tight end target. Okay. So he's already got the move tight end spot pretty much taken. But then Drew Ogletree, while he only had 9 catches, man, he had a couple touchdowns. He had a couple big plays and was the best blocker for all Colts tight ends. I mean, especially in the run, which, like Stats Matt said, that is huge. Okay, like they haven't had that kind of just bow type of blocker at tight end since Jack freaking Doyle. Okay, so like the fact that Drew Ogletree can lay those blocks is perfect. But when you talk about if Woods does elevate to the level they're hoping, I still think you have a role for Granson. I still think you have a role for Ogletree. Now we're going to probably talk about one of these guys getting cut, Andrew, but still, when in respect to these two, even if Woods makes just waves, you're still going to have a role for these two, because I don't think Woods will ever be the blocker Drew Ogletree is, and he's not going to probably be the separator or route runner that Kylan Granson is.
I would agree probably on the separation point. I think Woods can be a blocker. I think he just hasn't gotten to it yet. But as far as Kylan Granson and his ability to separate, it's a very unique part of his game that none of the other tight ends have. And I think it's attributed to his, having a wide receiver background. Kylan Granson was a wide receiver at SMU before he transitioned to a tight end, and he's a little bit smaller. He then Woods, Ogletree, Mo Alley Cox, these giants in the Colts tight end room. Kylan Granson is kind of the small one at 6'2", and so I think that helps. And he certainly has a unique skill set to that. But Kylan Granson here, the thing that he has on his side is he's been doing it for a while now. And he's going into his 4th season. Whether the Colts re-sign him after this season, I think depends a lot on what you're getting out of Jelani Woods and Drew Ogletree, and if he is expendable, and how the I guess development of Will Mallory That's certainly going to play a role in it since they're very similar players, in my opinion. But at least for this year, you've got Kylan Granson, and he's been running with the ones. I don't see that changing, through OTAs throughout the offseason program. It was Kylan Granson out there really taking the majority of those tight end snaps. Drew Ogletree would rotate in at times. Jelani Woods would rotate in at times, but it was Kylan Granson. And that's why I think, going back to this point, who currently is the tight end one for the Colts, I think it's Kylan Granson, because I think he's the one that's going to get the most snaps. He's the one that's going to get the most passes thrown his way at this point, unless Jelani Woods or Drew Ogletree can really hit the ground running, really just blow the doors off of the tight end position in preseason and training camp, or if Kylan Granson really starts to struggle. I think it's Granson's right now. Now, I do think that the Colts would eventually like to see Woods kind of ascend into that role and be that all-around tight end. But as of right now, it's Kylan Granson, and he's the one that gives the best chance for this Colts offense to win. And don't forget, Kylan Granson had 30 some catches, you said, Drake, but Granson, when Anthony Richardson
30 on the dot.
30 on the dot. So when Anthony Richardson was in there, I think a lot of his catches came with Anthony Richardson as the quarterback. Anthony Richardson really targeted the tight ends early on last season, and that's where you saw Ogletree getting some good run and some good play early in the season. Certainly Kylan Granson. Will that be the same this year? Will we see an uptick in tight end production with Anthony Richardson out there versus Gardner Minshew? I think so. So when you're talking about that, I think Kylan Granson's role is like you said, Drake, I think that's really set in stone. Drew Ogletree's is more up in the air, in my opinion. Yes, he has shown flashes, but again, the first season, torn ACL. Nothing you can really do about that, but he missed the year. Showed some flashes early last season, then he kind of fell off there towards the middle of the year, ended it with a suspension. So he isn't exactly riding a wave of momentum heading into this season. And if Jelani Woods continues the momentum he has been getting throughout the offseason, this could be where you see Drew Ogletree take a step back, and lose snaps to Jelani Woods. And you're looking at Ogletree taking on more of a reserve role if Jelani Woods steps into more of the starter's role.
Yeah, and look, at the end of the day, the Colts want Jelani Woods to work out, okay? But, even if he just does great during camp, I still don't see him, after having kind of a in-out type of role in 2022, where you'd see him do a bunch of snaps in 1 week, and then you'd see him kind of off the field the next, and then a missing last year entirely. I think that'd be foolhardy to just send this dude out there, even if he had a good camp, good offseason. So I still think Kylan Granson and Drew Ogletree have big claims, but something about Granson, to go back to what you mentioned about Richardson. So this is in the first 5 weeks, people. Okay. So the first 5 weeks. Now, keep in mind the Houston Texans game, Richardson he didn't even play half the game. And actually in that game, Granson had 3 catches, 4 targets in less than 2 quarters. Okay, so that dude was on his way to having 6 or 7 catches, but he had 13 of his 30 catches in those first 5 weeks with Richardson. After that, he had 2 games with no catches, and then 4 games with 1. So you see his totals drop off tremendously. Now his best game of the year, Andrew, 5 catches for 62 yards against the Falcons when there was nobody to throw to but Will Mallory and Kylan Granson. So people, I know that Kylan Granson isn't super flashy. I know that he hasn't blown up like Dallas Clark, but you know what? 2 things. Number one, this guy is a veteran. Anthony Richardson trusts him. Shane Steichen trusts him. The offensive scheme favors his receiving and separation ability, and he takes a damn good photo when he scores a touchdown, celebrating it like his first baby. So fans, just appreciate Kylan Granson, because I still think the best could be yet to come for this guy.
And although it's only one touchdown for Kylan Granson, that's another thing. And I hate to keep harping on this point, but
No, it's fine.
only one touchdown in 3 years for the guy that leads your team in tight end snaps. That's not good enough. If Kylan Granson wants another contract with the Colts, he can't just be the guy that goes out there and gets 8 yards for catch in the middle of the field. He needs to start scoring some points and creating some chunk plays, and not just a chunk play here or there. He needs to continue to up his game as well. But I wouldn't go this far. Wyatt Losses, I hate to say this, but Granson could be the odd man out this summer, maybe a trade candidate for a late rounder. I just don't see that, Wyatt. I mean, again, unless there is a team that has a plethora of injuries at the tight end position, I don't think Granson really moves the needle for a lot of teams. I think he's a solid tight end, but he's not necessarily going to be one that you go out and trade for. Plus, I don't think he's going to fall out of the graces of the Colts for that to happen. I don't see Mallory really having the preseason to make that kind of change, nor do I see, even if Jelani Woods does have a fantastic preseason, Granson still brings different skill sets to that position. So I don't see Granson being a trade candidate. I think he does end up making this roster, and again, probably being the starting move tight end for the Indianapolis Colts throughout the 2024 season. So let's talk about our next tight end, though, that Drake, that a lot of people think should be cut to not only save the Colts cap space, but because it's just such a crowded tight end room, and this guy may not have a very huge role, especially considering how much he's getting paid, and that's Mo Alley-Cox. So there has been a lot of talk this spring about the future with Mo Alley-Cox. Is he going to be traded? Will the Colts cut him? What will his role exactly look like? And so I think that's something that we can kind of talk about here as well. What do you see the future being like for Mo Alley-Cox? Because we're sitting here at almost July, Drake, and I think if the Colts would have cut Mo Alley-Cox, they would have done it by now. Or if they were planning on cutting Mo Alley-Cox, it would have been done by now. But because the closer we get to training camp in the regular season, I just don't see them cutting ties with number 81.
Yeah, and they've like you said, they've had the opportunity to do this multiple times, right? But I think that it really helps Mo's case. Number one, that Jelani hasn't played out yet, as a tight end.
Fair
one.
Point.
And two is that they haven't had that clear cut. Okay, this is the tight end guy. I know that's kind of similar to point number one, but it is different in the way that means that you kind of have just a group, okay, and you want a veteran to be in that group. You don't want, I'm not saying a young guy can't. I mean, Michael Pittman, tremendous leadership ability, not even 20, he's 26 years old. Okay. It can happen. But for the Colts tight end group, outside of Mo Alley-Cox, I'm not saying Kylan Granson can't lead that room, but Mo has been there since 2018. I mean, He has been there a long time. And, I when I covered the tight ends in an article, he has 102 catches for 1,286 receiving yards. Not that great. But here's the thing. Nearly 14% of his catches are touchdowns. I mean, he is a valuable red zone target. And I've changed my tune on Mo because I remember writing a piece last year, maybe even the year before. I think 2 years in a row, I wrote pieces saying he should be cut. But he's valuable to the tight end room until one of two things happens. One, there's a clear-cut number one, or Jelani Woods takes off. And two is that the Colts feel comfortable with what they have at that position, that they don't need a veteran. Honestly, I wouldn't even be surprised if there's no one else that could use him, and the Colts, just being who they are, re-sign him to a much less, a lesser deal, than the one he's on, which I think is like 3 years, $18 million, too much money. But Mo's got value, man. He's got red zone appeal. He can block. Outside of Drew Ogletree, he's the best blocker. I don't think you're going to see him go anywhere, and I do expect them to re-sign him to less money.
Yeah, I think you have a lot of valid points there, and then all of those kind of combined are the big reason why Mo Alley-Cox is still with the Indianapolis Colts. But why I say he's not going to get cut is because, like you mentioned it, Drew, he is Drake. He is the Drake of Drew Ogletree. Mo Alley Cox is the leader of that tight end room. You know, the veteran, the guy all of these young players look up to. He is that sounding board, and he is plain and simple is the leader. That means something to this Colts team. Number two, you know, Mo Alley Cox, I think if he was going to be cut, like I said, it would have happened a long time ago, because when you think about past players that the Colts have let go, I mean, Shaquille Leonard was a little bit different situation, but the Colts typically, if they know they're going to let someone go, they let them go so they have an opportunity to go out there and find another team, and kind of find themselves the best situation possible. If the Colts were really going to cut Mo Alley Cox, I think they would have done so back in the free agency period. So that way, before teams had already kind of really dialed in their rosters, Mo Alley Cox could go out there and have more options and finding the team that he wants to play for. That doesn't really look a lot. It doesn't really look like something that could happen at this point in the calendar. So Mo Alley Cox would be very limited on where he can go. And then finally, you know, he is the best blocking tight end that the Colts have. You know, Drew Ogletree, yes, showed flashes, but overall throughout the entire season, it ended up being Mo Alley Cox, you know, and Mo Alley Cox, you know what you're getting in Mo Alley Cox. You're getting a guy that will go out there and do the dirty work. Stats Matt says Mo, to me, at best, is a backup tight end and a special teams blocker. So basically a tight end 4. And I think that's what his role could be for this team. Drake, if I had to put, you know, maybe a bold prediction out there for this tight end room, I would say that it might be more likely that Drew Ogletree is cut than Mo Alley Cox. Simply put, because of all the things that have gone on with Drew Ogletree, and if Jelani Woods really steps up and can basically, you know, take over Drew Ogletree's role and more, then you're kind of looking at, what does Drew Ogletree bring to this team that we don't already have? Is he the big tight end that can be a blocker but also a receiving threat? No, that would be Jelani Woods. He doesn't exactly bring the separation that Kylan Granson brings, or the speed that Will Mallory brings, or the blocking ability at the high blocking ability that Mo Alley Cox brings. So Drew Ogletree, in my opinion, is probably the most likely candidate to be the odd man out of these 5 tight ends when you're talking about what exactly they all bring to the table. And just strictly talking, that I don't think Mo Alley Cox is going anywhere. And, you know, it's a fair point that let's see, Stats Matt coming in here and playing devil's advocate. Drew brings a $4 million cheaper tight end that's serviceable at blocking. Yes, I understand that, but, you know, that's saying that they're still thinking about Mo Alley Cox going somewhere, and I just really don't think that's a thing, you know. So it's going to be interesting to see, though, what the future does bring for Mo Alley Cox, but it would have to be like a vet minimum in order for Mo Alley Cox to be back with this team next year. I think the Colts are going to be ready to move on, and especially if there is big seasons out of Woods, and if Ogletree stays, if Mallory continues to develop, it'd be tough to see the Colts bring back Mo Alley Cox for really anything besides the vet minimum.
Yeah, and look, you know, Drew Ogletree, I love what you said about that, because he did miss his entire rookie season. So you have to factor that in. It's a brutal league, but injury history and injury issues are just detrimental, especially to a guy who isn't a clear-cut starter, a la Anthony Richardson. But you're talking about a guy who caught 9 out of 21 targets. So not saying that the quarterback play was always the best, right? Because Richardson was learning, Minshew's a backup, but nobody else had that kind of catch percentage from the tight end group. In fact, Mallory was astonishing, and Mo did fine, and so did Kylan Granson. So really, Drew Ogletree is the odd man out in the receiving category. And while he can block, you've seen such a small sample size that it's hard to trust that. And when it comes down to cut day, you're not going to, in this situation, say, you know, let's go with the potential to save money over the veteran that we know and trust. You're just not going to do that. You're going to remove Drew Ogletree. He's right now, I agree with you. I think that he's probably the most likely tight end to get cut if they decide not to go with 5, which I just cannot imagine the Colts going with 5 tight ends. I think that'd be crazy. So yeah.
I don't think
It's
it's
hard.
like I don't think it's likely either. But at the same time, it wouldn't surprise me if they do that. As Wyatt Law says, if they just carry 2 quarterbacks and 3 running backs, might they opt to roll with 5 tight ends? The new kickoff rules could enter the calculations. It doesn't. It wouldn't surprise me if that's a possibility. Because you think about this. Say the Colts don't want to keep Sam Ellinger. They're fine with Anthony Richardson, Joe Flacco, and then Keaton Slovis, say on the practice squad, or say Sam is able to get through to the practice squad, which I don't know if they would do since they've kept him on the active roster for the past couple of seasons. But if you look at the running back situation, what if they only keep 3 there with Taylor, Sermon, and Hall? Wide receiver, they're probably going to keep those 6 guys. But think about the offensive line. Instead of keeping 9 offensive linemen, do they only keep 8 offensive linemen? The starting 5, and then you think about Freeland, you think about Bordellini and Gonzalez. If it's going to be an interesting numbers game to see how this all plays out, because you can't keep everybody. And we already know that the Colts are probably going to keep those 6 wide receivers. I'd be shocked if they didn't keep those 6 guys. You look at the offensive line, those are the ones that they just drafted as the backups. That could potentially be an area where you cut. Defensive line, they're probably going to keep 10 guys, I would say, at least. So it's again, some of these back positions might just be how they help on special teams and how they've performed in the preseason and kind of prove themselves to that point. But Drake, let's talk about the final tight end that on this roster that could potentially make an impact. And I think he's a big wild card, and that's Will Mallory. I was kind of shocked by the move last year because they already had 4 tight ends. You add a 5th to the equation, a guy that was really similar, in my opinion, to what Kylan Granson brought to this team. But Will Mallory showed out last season, and he showed a lot of promise. I know you're a really big fan of Will Mallory, Drake. Tell me, what do you think his role is going to be this season, and what do you think he can be, and of his, I guess, in terms of his importance to this Colts offense?
I'm so high on Will Mallory just because there's incredible speed there, fastest tight end of the 2023 draft class, great hands, great catch radius, great route running, horrific blocker. Can't be trusted to block yet. I mean, the Colts did not have this guy out on blocking duty at all. They did, but he was bad. And so it's clear that he has to get better at blocking, because Granson is actually, I would say, a couple levels above him, and Granson's a below average blocker. So Mallory's got to learn how to block, or he is strictly move tight end. Now, if he becomes that, he's got to be better at route running, separation, catching, everything to really make a big difference as just a move tight end, because Kylan Granson's the veteran at that. Then you've got potentially a tight end 2 being a blocking variety behind a guy like Jelani Woods if he pans out. So I just think the sky's the limit for Will Mallory. He's incredibly fast for a position where you can be faster than the linebackers and bigger than the defensive backs. But if he can't block, I can still see him snagging 30, 35 catches, kind of similar to Granson. But if he can't block, I think that he's strictly a receiving threat, and that's only going to get you so far in a Shane Steichen offense, especially if he does get that tight end 1 in Jelani Woods, because as we discussed, Hunter Henry, Dallas Goedert, those guys are tight end 1s. They don't take snaps. They don't share snaps a whole lot with anybody. So
it's funny you mentioned that, because when you look at, obviously the tape, when we watch it last year, it shows that Will Mallory definitely has a sizable ways to go in terms of his blocking. But according to Pro Football Focus, his run blocking grade was 67.5 last season. And we talked about, Jelani Woods needing to get better. His run blocking was a 50.3 in 2022. So for all that we say about, Jelani Woods needs to be a better blocker, Will Mallory, it looks like, is already, according to Pro Football Focus at least, is a considerably better blocker than Jelani Woods is. So, but yeah, Drake, I think his home is at that move tight end position. And again, he brings a lot of the similar qualities that Kylan Granson does. The big difference is Will Mallory is a little bit bigger than Kylan Granson, and he's faster than Kylan Granson as well. So he brings a more vertical threat to the tight end position than I think Kylan Granson does. So it's going to be, and I think when you're talking about Kylan Granson's future with the Colts, I think a lot of it is going to be how Will Mallory develops this season. Because if you can take Kylan Granson out and Will Mallory can step in and you really don't lose much, if any, then I think Kylan Granson this is his last season as a Colt, because you've drafted Will Mallory and you have him waiting in the wings. If Will Mallory really struggles and Kylan Granson has a career season, then I think it flips. Then I think Kylan Granson probably stays with the Colts regardless of what Jelani Woods does this year, because then you can use Granson and Woods and kind of play off one another. So, but I think really will the season that and the progression that Will Mallory shows is going to have an impact on what happens with Kylan Granson. And then when you look at Will Mallory himself, if he can do that and he can be what Kylan Granson brings to this offense, you're looking at Will Mallory being a starter in 2025, and pairing him with Jelani Woods, then I think you have a more vertical tight end pairing there with Woods and Mallory, a faster, more explosive tight end pairing when you take Granson out and put Mallory in. So it's going to be very interesting how much the Colts use Mallory in these situations. Are they going to give him an opportunity to go out there, or is Granson going to produce and play at such a high level that there's no real chance for Mallory to go out there and show his stuff, because the Colts need Granson out there for what he's able to do on the field?
Yeah, and you actually proved a very valid point, and I was a numbskull here. So, well, the reason that I pinned Mallory as a guy they don't trust to block is because he only had 26 run blocking snaps.
A lot of his blockings was outside, wasn't in line in the traditional sense. Like Stats Matt says here, Mallory's serviceable at blocking outside, but not in line. And a lot of the in line, or a lot of the blocking reps that Jelani Woods received, was in line as a blocking tight end.
Yeah, but there's a lot of run plays that, you need serviceable blocking on the outside. So,
yeah.
I was definitely not as I was absolutely wrong on his efficiency, because in those 26 run blocking snaps per PFF, the dude actually had the highest grade run block metric of any Indianapolis Colts tight end. But Kylan Granson had the worst, and he actually had 174 run blocking snaps, third on the team. Of course, Mo had the most. But so let me rephrase, people. Andrew, this is why he's here, is to help a guy like me. It looks like Will Mallory is actually further along in run blocking than Kylan Granson, and they're both probably going to block similarly. They're probably both going to be blocking on the outside more than in line because they're smaller. So, at the end of the day, man, Will Mallory, I think as far as ceiling, it's behind Jelani Woods. Will Mallory could really do some special things. And if he can get trust from the Colts and continue to be thrown in on a few more run blocking snaps, get more snaps in general, if he can actually block serviceably, it's really hard to not imagine him and Kylan Granson fighting it out for that move tight end role.
And it's a much smaller sample size with Will Mallory in terms of his blocking as well. Last season, he had 26 run blocking snaps.
Still efficient.
As opposed to Jelani Woods, who in 2022 had almost 4 times as many, 108 run blocking snaps, and 34% of the snaps that Woods took in 2022 were blocking snaps, where he had a blocking assignment, as opposed to Mallory was only 16% of the snaps that he took in 2023. He had a blocking assignment. So right there, Drake, that shows you the different roles that these two played. Mallory was out there as a receiving option, where Woods was primarily a receiving option with 2/3 of his reps being as a receiver. But again, much more blocking opportunities for Woods and for him to work on his game, because the Colts feel like he can be an all-around tight end, as opposed to Mallory, who is more suited for that receiving tight end role specifically. But Drake, we've talked about all the tight ends for the Indianapolis Colts, all of their skill sets and what they could potentially do in 2024. Now it's time to take a look at the rest of the AFC South. So for our positional rankings for the tight end position, I only did the top 3 tight ends because in some cases, like the Texans, I think they only have 3 tight ends on their roster currently. So we're going to look at who the projected top 3 tight ends are for each one of these teams, and we can go through them again and see who has the best tight end room in the AFC South. Obviously, with the Indianapolis Colts, Kylen Granson right now is probably the tight end 1. He's probably the tight end that is going to receive the most snaps in this offense. But Jelani Woods there at number 2. I really think Jelani Woods could surpass Kylen Granson throughout this season and be that top tight end for the Colts. Wouldn't shock me in the slightest. And in fact, I might be expecting it to happen. And then as of right now, we'll put Drew Ogletree as that tight end 3. Probably the guy that is going to be used primarily as the blocking tight end. Was definitely the tight end number 2 behind Kylen Granson last season. So as of right now, heading into the season, I'll put Drew Ogletree there at number 3. The Texans, Dalton Schultz, they re-signed him to another deal, and Schultz became one of CJ Stroud's favorite targets last season. The Texans also drafted Cade Stover out of Ohio State. He definitely has a relationship with CJ Stroud, so that definitely had to be on the minds of the Texans front office when they drafted Stover. And then third, Tegan Quitoriano, that might be his last name, a guy that barely had any snaps for the Texans. So really it'd be 2 tight ends that most of the Texans are using. The Jaguars potentially have the best, and I'm going to go out there and say they do have the best tight end in the AFC South in Evan Ingram. 114 catches last season. I think Evan Ingram is a borderline top 5 tight end in the NFL. Certainly he's putting up the stats. Trevor Lawrence's favorite target last season, and he cashed in on a major deal this offseason. Luke Farrell is a distant tight end 2 for the Jaguars. Really kind of just comes in and cleans up, or when Ingram needs a breather. And then you have Josiah DeGuara. I'm butchering that last name, but he really doesn't play that much for the Jaguars. Then you move on to the Titans. They got Chigoziem Okonkwo, who was a really big target for Will Levis a season ago. Certainly came on the scene and became a real threat at tight end. Josh Weil, the rookie last season out of Cincinnati, played a sizable role as well when his name was called upon. And then they signed to Nick Vannett, the 9-year pro, in free agency this year to round out their group. So Drake, going through all that, what stands out to you about these tight ends in the AFC South, and just what each one of these teams has in general?
I know that, Tegan Quitoriano and I think Josiah DeGuara and Luke Farrell, those are 3 guys that and maybe even Nick Vannett, he's kind of bounced around the league. Those are guys you really don't talk about, but man, they kind of present the same sort of approach the Colts are doing, because Luke Farrell's actually a great blocker. Cade Stover, I mean, I know he's a rookie, but he kind of reminds me, weirdly enough, of Dalton Schultz. I like just the way he kind of plays. I think that it's probably the most ambiguous position group we've covered thus far. Just because outside of Evan Ingram, and you just have to admit it, because the freaking dude, 3 more catches last season, people. And he sets the all-time NFL record for most catches in a season by a tight end.
Crazy.
I mean, he's only behind Zach Ertz with 116. So, I mean, that's incredible. So, I mean, he had 114 catches. He needs more of a blocking variety behind him. That's Luke Farrell. I honestly think each one of these teams presents their own threat, and a good threat if they use these guys properly. But outside of the Jaguars and maybe the Texans, maybe the Texans. We'll see if Schultz can do it in year 2 with Stroud. I just don't see a clear number 1. You know what I mean? I mean, Schultz is damn close because he did great with Dallas. He did pretty damn good last year, but he wasn't the absolute go-to guy. Initially, it was Tank Dell and just for the most part, Dell and Collins. So I think that Schultz really erupted, and I think that he's going to do well. But it's ambiguous, man. It's kind of a crappy thing to say, but that's really all I can say when I look at this whole graphic.
This to me is probably the hardest position group we've had to rank so far.
Yeah.
Because, and I think Stats Matt makes a really good point in the chat. You know, when you look at every single one of these tight end ones, I think the Colts probably have the 4th best tight end one. If you're going by Schultz, Ingram, and Okonkwo, I think Kylan Granson is behind all 3 of those guys. However, when you look at Granson, Woods, and Ogletree, you could argue that the Colts have the next best 3 tight ends. So it might go Ingram, Schultz, Okonkwo for 1, 2, and 3, but then you probably got Granson, Woods, Ogletree at 4, 5, and 6. So it kind of depends on where you put your stock. If you want to just simply go who has the best starting tight end, because those are the guys that are going to be playing the most snaps, then you're probably going to rank the Colts lower. However, if you're looking at the tight end group as a whole, then you're probably going to rank the Colts a little bit higher because they have the depth at the tight end position unlike anything else in the AFC South. It is a huge drop-off, in my opinion, from Schultz to Stover because, again, Stover's a rookie. We don't exactly know what he's got. From Ingram to Farrell's a huge drop-off. From Okonkwo to Weil is a huge drop-off. But Granson, Woods, and Ogletree, all are, solid tight ends. And I don't think there's much drop off from each one of those guys. So it's going to be, I think it's interesting. And you could really have, a lot of different answers just depending on what you put stock into. Would you rather have a high end tight end one and not as quality depth, or would you rather have a tight end by committee approach and have a bunch of guys that have different skill sets that you can plug and play in multiple situations?
That's really all upon the scheme. And, I think that with Steichen's scheme, you're just hoping that Woods takes off because, that's a great point that Stats Matt made. I mean, Granson, he has ability, right? But even Chigoziem Okonkwo, fun fact, okay, you're talking about Dalton Schultz as opposed to this guy. One guy had an elite offense. The other guy had the opposite, basically, with a rookie quarterback trying to learn the ropes. And he only caught 3 or 5 fewer passes and only 105 fewer yards. Now, Chigoziem was far more of like a short yardage guy with only 1 touchdown. My point is this, man. I mean, this guy still caught 70% of his targets. I mean, Okonkwo with Brian Callahan, all I'm saying is that's a guy that could be kind of a scary receiving option, given what he can do, and he can run and pass block serviceably at his height and weight. So I do think that if you're talking about top, it's Ingram. If you're talking about the room, it's real. I love Cade Stover. I loved that pick by the Texans. It's so difficult. I think that the Colts definitely have one of the best, if not the best, overall tight end group if we're talking about these top 3 guys. And then you got to factor in Mo. Who the heck is the tight end for any one of those guys? Maybe not even have one.
Yeah, I agree. So let's kick off the rankings here, Drake. I always pass it on to you to give your rankings first and put you right on the spot. I'm going to give you time to think this time. I'm going to give my rankings here first. And guys, I got to go with the Colts. I understand that you're looking at Evan Ingram as a top 5 tight end, but I'm going to go on the depth because I think the tight end room as a whole, this is what we're talking about, the room as a whole for these teams, I think the Colts have the best tight end room in the AFC South. And they potentially have a guy in Jelani Woods that can reach the level of an Evan Ingram. Well, again, we'll just kind of have to see how that all plays out in 2024. But if we're looking specifically at the tight end room, I'm going to go with the Colts having the best tight end room in the AFC South. And I think if Jelani Woods can reach his potential, like we all think could be a very good possibility in 2024, then I think it's no question that the Colts have the best tight end room in the AFC South. Shout out to my beautiful wife, Danielle, for her nightly super sticker as well as we rank these tight ends. Appreciate you and all of your support as always. Drake, then I'm going to go with the Jaguars because I think Evan Ingram is that good of a tight end. I would say easily top 6 tight end in the NFL. And I think that what he means to Trevor Lawrence definitely boosts him up the rankings. Now, if he does get hurt, there's big shoes to fill. Do I think Luke Farrell can fill those? Probably not. So a lot of this rests on Evan Ingram. So that's why I'm going to put the Jaguars there at 2 because I think Evan Ingram is such a fantastic talent. Then I'm going to go with the Texans because Dalton Schultz, I think, is very, very close to Chigoziem Okonkwo. But Cade Stover, I would take over Josh Weil. I think Cade Stover is going to be a good talent. I think that I guess I should say, I think that his connection, his previous work with CJ Stroud is an underrated aspect to all of this. So when you look at these guys, I'm going to go and take that all into account. I'm going Texans 3, and then I'll go Titans at 4. But I think the Texans and Titans are close. I think you probably have the Colts and the Jaguars, the Jaguars slightly under the Colts, just because I think of Evan Ingram's his body of work and what he means to the Jaguars. The Colts, it's more of a committee approach. I think that's what makes them so close. Then I think there's probably I wouldn't say a huge gap, but there's a gap there. And then I think the Texans and Titans are right there. Texans, maybe I would even put as 3A, Titans 3B. That's how close I think those two rooms are. But overall, I think when you're looking at the cream of the crop for the tight ends, it's got to be the Colts and the Jaguars in the AFC South.
Yeah, and if we're talking about top to bottom, Colts are number 1, just because you do have the upside of Jelani Woods, but Kylan Granson and Drew Ogletree are proven. And you've got a separator at number 1. You've got potentially an all-around talent, and maybe at the worst, you have an athletic freak that could be a red zone target at number 2, and you've got a blocker that can break the seam there at number 3. Now, I think second is definitely the Jaguars. And look, I know that Luke Farrell, by the way, blocker, not going to fill Evan Ingram's shoes. Josiah DeGuara is like 6'2", like 235 pounds. So he's more of your move variety.
That's like Kylan Granson's build.
Yeah. And if it wasn't for Evan Ingram, they'd be last. They would be dead last. Okay. So they have to be second, though, because Ingram almost broke the NFL record for most catches by a tight end in his season. Number 3, I'm going to go with the Texans just because Dalton Schultz is proven. I almost went with the Titans just because Okonkwo's upside scares me, but I think that Cade Stover's got a role, and Quitoriano actually was a 5th-round pick. He's more of a blocking variety, so I just think that they've got, Dalton Schultz is going to take most of, if not damn near all the snaps until Stover can get a feel for the NFL. And then last, of course, is going to be the Titans. I mean, Vanett is a veteran blocker, about 6'5". Josh Wiley is like a weird build. He's like 6'6", 6'7", but he's like 240, 245. So didn't really do much last season, but Okonkwo, unproven thus far, but I'm telling you, people, that's a guy that you need to watch out for because he has Evan Ingram vibes and he has Brian Callahan helping him develop. So we'll have to see. But right now it goes Colts, Jags, Texans, Titans as far as the overall talent of the tight end rooms when you put them all together.
So Drake and I have the same ratings for the tight end.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that.
For in the AFC South, but when you look at it as a whole, Drake, obviously we talk about the Colts and their tight end room a lot and the potential that it has. At some point, that potential has to become production. And I think that 2024 has to be the year. You have to see Jelani Woods reach that potential. You have to see Kylan Granson be more productive and score more points. Can Drew Ogletree kind of reach that and take a next step into his game? What about Will Mallory's development? And is Mo Alley Cox still going to be a part of this team in 2025? So while the group has a lot of potential and a lot of talent, there I think is a lot of question marks surrounding this team, and we aren't going to find out those answers until the 2024 season is in the books. And then, who knows, maybe moves are made to get a star tight end, which I was clamoring for the Colts to get Brock Bowers all off season, but I digress. But we'll have to see. But like I said, eventually that potential has to turn into production. And if it doesn't in 2024, the Colts may be looking at outside options at tight end to give Anthony Richardson that bona fide tight end one that they're looking for. Because I will say it until I'm blue in the face, it's all about Anthony Richardson. And internally, the Colts hope that is Jelani Woods, but we're going to have to see if the 2024 season actually produces a star tight end and a viable option that makes Anthony Richardson and this Colts offense even more dynamic.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it's really all about who's got the hot hand right now, because it's such a close competition from 1 to 4, really 1 to 5. It could really be anybody's guess who the hell is going to start at tight end. So
exactly. And as we close out the show tonight, we've got one more super chat, this time from NFL Nerd, and it's a good one. NFL Nerd, thank you so much for all of your support, buddy. Really, really do appreciate it. And this is a fantastic question. Who do you think Steichen likes the most right now out of the tight ends? So we can really only go off of what he has told us and what he has said in his media sessions. And so far, the two guys that he has brought up the most, Jelani Woods and Kylan Granson. He has talked quite a bit, actually, about Jelani Woods this offseason in the spring programs. At first, he said, we haven't really been able to get a look at him to know what he's capable of. So excited about that. But then talking to him later in the spring, and once we got to OTAs and mandatory minicamp, Shane Steichen talked about how impressed he was that Jelani Woods is going out there and making plays almost every single day in practice. And we even talked about it. We reported on it from what was happening at OTAs and in mandatory minicamp. The tight end that was making the most plays was Jelani Woods. So if that's the case, the Colts are kind of developing some plans for Woods this offseason, which again bodes well for what the Colts and what Woods wants to accomplish this season. And then for Kylan Granson, Kylan Granson obviously is the starting tight end with the Colts, and he was making, I would say, a lot, but whenever you heard about Anthony Richardson making plays to tight ends, it was Woods, obviously, but Kylan Granson's name was the name that came up next as the most, the tight end that was producing. So as of right now, who I think Steichen likes the most and sees the most upside and most potential with this offense, I would have to probably say it's Woods and Granson.
Yeah, I think he probably likes Woods the most, but right in this immediate moment, probably trusts Granson. But
that's a very good way to put it.
Both of those at the same time, they're the ones that have been showing out the most, and it's kind of not really that surprising to hear.
Yeah, and if you think about it, those could be the two tight end packages that we see. Woods in line, Granson out in the slot. Could be dangerous for the Indianapolis Colts. So NFL Nerd, thank you so much for your question and for ending us on a really high note. So that's our show for today, guys. Really appreciate everybody tuning in to talk about the tight end position with us. I know Drake and Noah covered this a while back, but I wanted to get my 2 cents in as well. And of course, It fits right in with our positional previews. So appreciate you all coming out and talking Colts football with us this evening. NFL Nerd wants you to drink. Drake, you didn't drink for his super chat.
Oh, so my apologies.
Yes, and Danny said it last week too. On Thursday, she said, "I don't know if Drake actually drank when I gave my my super sticker." So my wife's on to you, Drake. My wife's on to you, Drake.
I did.
Shout out to NFL Nerd, my beautiful wife Danielle, and Truitt for the super chats, and everyone else that joined us this evening. If you haven't done so, please go follow us on all of our socials, like Horseshoe Huddle on Facebook, follow at Colts on FN on X, and subscribe right here on YouTube. Hit that bell so you know when Drake and I go live every Monday and Thursday night. Also give the video a like. It helps us in the YouTube algorithm as well. And if you can't catch us live or you're listening to us, please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and give us a 5-star review so we can continue to reach other Colts fans just like you. Drake, as always, has been writing away on horseshoehuddle.com. pumping out content all summer long. Even though the Colts are off on vacation, Drake certainly isn't. Tell the people what they need to go check out.
Ah, the hell with vacation. No, I'm just kidding. I did a couple aggregates on how Anthony Richardson's potential is limitless. There's also an offseason grade, but probably one of the more fascinating articles that I did was Shaq Leonard talking about his 2024 season, what he's looking forward to, looking back on his Colts career, but also lastly, and potentially most important right now, is that Anthony Richardson could be in line to be one of the top fantasy football quarterbacks of 2024. So go check those out.
Definitely give those a read. Myself, it's rookie file season for me. So I'm doing a lot of bigger pieces. So make sure you grab a drink, get comfortable when you read the rookie files. But I tell you, they're my favorite pieces that I do all year. Probably the most work I put into my pieces all year long as well. So I really appreciate if you check those out. We have Latu Latu out there. We have Adonai Mitchell out there. Both of their rookie files and their stories are live on horseshoehuddle.com. And this week we'll be at least getting to Matt Gonzalez, hoping to have that out on Wednesday morning, and then potentially Tanner Bortolini as well. So make sure to check that out, as well as everything else by our fantastic writers at horseshoehuddle.com. Go follow Drake at DWallsterDrake. You can follow me at Andrew Moore NFL, and we'll be back Thursday night to talk about the offensive line room, bringing back all 5 starters, but adding some depth pieces. Could be another big year for the boys in blue up front. So make sure you tune in on Thursday as we talk about the offensive line, and we'll be seeing you then, Colts fans. Have a great week.